So, and I had some piers done recently, and so I had some pretty good numbers of what decking and is per square foot. We use those numbers as estimating. They're a little conservative, meaning probably on the high end, but we're looking at somewhere between, just on the pier work itself, barring not finding something substantial. That's assuming that all the pilings are still good and that the majority of the pile bents are still structurally sound, and just replacing stringers when needed. We're somewhere in that $250,000 range in just materials and labor and equipment to rebuild them like they were before the storm, which is a big number.
Since it is that high, is it required to have an engineer of record?
That is correct, and I've already gone ahead, and we one of the things that we did, State Marine Resources has some recommendations as far as how to construct a pier on the bay, and we've kind of presented that not only to the state but to FEMA, saying that this is a minimum guidance design standard, and we would like to reconstruct these to that minimum standard. And under public assistance, it says that if the code has changed or you have to rebuild it to a new code, that's not considered mitigation, and the public assistance will pay for that. So I'm hoping that at least they will, if they do enact the public assistance, they will recognize that design standard to go by to reconstruct those. And we're going to do all those plans in-house, so we won't have an engineering expense to put that together. So, any other questions?
Any other questions?
Have we confirmed whether or not with Fairhope docks we will get FEMA money?
It's
because the storm hit before we took over ownership.
Well, we included it in our estimates. That is one of those questions that we'll have to ask, but since, as I understand it, we've always owned it. It was just under lease. It didn't come back to non-lease ownership until us after the date of the storm. Is that correct? I don't know if that'll bar us from being able to accept public assistance on that. And because it's still a city-owned property, whether we were under the management at the time or not. So I think we'll be okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard. For the sake of time and one gentleman that's here, I'm going to ask Mr. Wynn Tutt, would you want to come up and introduce the gentleman from St. Michael Catholic School? And I want to talk to you guys about item number 10 on the agenda. You may be wondering what the Educational Building Authority of the City of Fairhope is for St. Michael Catholic High School. And we'll explain this to you.
Yes, this is Gray Reddit, who lives over here on the Eastern Shore, but is the attorney for the diocese, the Catholic Diocese of Mobile, and he has been spearheading the legal requirements for St. Michael's, and he was here today to ask that the council consider a resolution. I'll let Gray explain that.
Yeah, how you doing, Mr. Reddit? I'm going to let you get out of here early. Probably got better places to be.
I appreciate that. As a couple of you will remember, back in 2015, when the high school was in its infancy, as far as the construction went, we came to the council and asked that an educational authority be created in order that it could issue bonds to finance the high school. And the council did pass that ordinance and created the educational authority. Under the Alabama statute, the board members of the authority, their initial terms are staggered, and the first board member, his term expires, James Bailey expires in the second Monday of November of this year. And we've come to the commission asking that he be reappointed as a director or as a board member of the Educational Foundation. And just as a heads up, there are 3 members on it. The second staggered term ends a year from now, and the third staggered term ends in 2 years from now. So we'll be coming back this time next year asking for reappointment of the second board member, and then reappointment of the third board member the following year.
Right. And council, just so you know, this doesn't commit the city of Fairhope to any, we're not guaranteeing the bond issuance or anything like that.
No
it
way.
just is for them to be able to issue the bond, they have to have this board of directors.
Right, and
just be
the
named
bonds
by the
have been
city.
issued and fully subscribed. So,
Right. Any questions for Mr. Reddit? Does anybody see a reason for him to stick around for the council meeting tonight?
very much appreciate that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
His brother Marcus said hello.
I will do that.
Oh, red flag, hang on. All right, department heads. Who wants to go first? Richard, do you have anything else under Public Works?
We're just I'm in a learning and growing mode, and we're going. So hopefully I'll have more to report in the future.
Okay. Sherry Lee? Do you have a report?
Hello. So you have the moratorium report in front of you, which I've been working on with a team of people. I think, was that me? Excuse me. So that will tell you a lot of the things we've been working on through the moratorium period. And when you read it, you'll see sort of how my role plays with the other departments. It's a thread throughout the report, so I hope you find it helpful. All of the grant proposals that you've approved to date are all coming to fruition at once. So meaning either the full proposals are due, they're all in different stages, but most of the work that I've been doing is moving those forward. Working a lot with Richard on some of those proposals. He's active in 2 or 3 of them. So we're kind of getting up to speed on that. And then also the South Fairhope Community Action Plan, planning a big community meeting there at the Rotary Youth Club that's coming up on November the 8th. And that's an evening meeting. And so there's a lot that goes into that, including some stormwater stuff, so that everything's kind of interwoven. But those are the things that's been going on in my department. Parking, I'm sorry, I looked at Jay and thought of Alex and then merchants and led me to parking. That's moving forward too rather quickly, excitingly. I'm hoping that AlDOT signs off and that MPO signs off. It's on the agenda tonight.
Why don't you touch on those? You've got the wayfinding
Yeah.
grant, which is item 13.
Yeah,
I'm
and that
sorry,
one's
that's not item
planning.
13. That is item 14.
You've got the
No,
PL
that's not it
grant.
either. I can't see this thing. It's 15. Item 15 and item 17.
So I think 15 is the PL grant with Christian Preuss. And that one there will be a civil engineer involved working with Christian Preuss. That's the wayfinding and traffic downtown pedestrian safety project. What will come out of that is some recommendations for safety and easing up the traffic on pedestrians specifically to downtown. The other one, did you have a question? Anyone?
Yeah, I do. Is that any way repetitive to the Dan Burden study, or is this just the next step?
It would be the next step of a portion of his study. The other project on number 16 or 17 is another part of Dan Burden's recommendations, and that has to do with the parking garage and that whole area. And that is to attract more people to use the garage, provide easier access into the garage itself, a more pedestrian-friendly alleyway that leads you into the downtown area. Again, a lot that goes into that, and I'm hoping what will happen is, as we move forward, the first thing that has to happen is council, we're asking to approve an increase in that grant amount, which we were asking for $250,000, we'll be asking for $600,000, which ups our portion of match to $120,000.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Sherry Lee, that's to cover everything. That's to do the whole
That will cover
project.
that will cover the entire project. The amount we initially asked for would have only covered a portion of the project. These are upgrades that really needed to be made to that alleyway anyway, repaving, lighting, accessibility, restriping. There are a lot of different things back there that needed to happen. So this grant, the 600 will cover everything, whereas the 250 would have covered a portion. It would have covered the Bratz hub. I don't want to call it a hub because it's not the full station, but the pickup location, and it would have covered a little bit of the upgrades to the parking garage, but not to the extent that this will. This will really make it a place where people actually want to go, an alleyway that people will want to walk down. It'll lead people into downtown shopping, especially those merchants on Church Street that are often forgotten over on South Church. So I think it'll solve a lot of different problems that I know that you've been hearing because you've told me, and then that I've been hearing. but that'll come up tonight too.
Okay.
So
That was a
within-
good question that you had, Councilman Brown, about the wayfinding. You know, we're going to keep studying things to death.
I've heard,
We're
but
going to take
Dan
some
Burton
action. But
recommended
he
these, and now we're
recommended the study.
implementing. Okay, that's
Yeah,
what I'm making
his
sure we're not
study
studying the
recommended
study.
that
That's
study.
right. So
He
this is
didn't
the
recommend
next.
where to put wayfinding.
Gotcha.
Yeah, or the
particles.
design, or all those other
Right.
things that come
He just recommended
into
that we
it.
should do that. And so we will get
Exactly.
hard and fast suggestions of what we should do. Put
Where
a
it-
sign here, paint the street here, do this,
Exactly.
do that. I mean, it'll be something that's actionable.
Concrete. I mean, I wish it even covered the actual implementation. I hoped it would, but they won't let me use the funding for that part. So, but it will cover the full plan, where it goes, recommendations for.
And if we have anything available, I would say, though, that item 17 would probably allow those funds to be used for that.
Yes, that's right. That's right. And we'll talk about that. They're specific about commingling, and, you know, the grants are very separate, so we have to make sure there are no issues there, but we can address that with MPO during that board meeting, which I believe is this week, too.
Okay.
And just as an update, this is near and dear.
I'm going to have to ask you to come up here.
Yeah.
One of the things, and you're well aware of this from your time in the MPO, we have already, if y'all do affirmative action on, and I'm referring to it as the Alley Park and Ride Project number 17, is we have already put out there to AlDOT and Federal Highway, we want it to be an LPA project, meaning local project approval, meaning that administration, meaning that we will manage that project in-house at Fairhope, because you're aware what happens when you let AlDOT do it, and it tends to get project creep, and it gets real complicated for no necessary reason. So Sherry Lee and I have a conference call, I saw it, you saw it, on Friday morning with the Federal Highway as well as the AlDOT people, and they're going to let us know whether they're okay with that. So far, the signs are good that we can manage that whole project here locally, as opposed to some folks out of Montgomery making decisions what's best for downtown Fairhope.
Excellent. Thank you.
And we love our friends at AlDOT, that's not
Yes, we
to
do.
say, yes. So, yeah, and I think I mentioned something to you Friday about that too, Jack.
Okay.
We had talked about, a little bit about that, and we'll, in the next resolution phase, when we get there, if it passes tonight, we'll talk some more about how that needs to be worded so that we can manage it
Excellent.
in-house.
Okay. Any other questions for Sherry Lee? Okay. Thank you.
So I mentioned real briefly, the moratorium's over, so we're back in full swing again. We've got several projects that are coming in, not a just explosion, but we have projects coming in. In the moratorium report, you'll see that in planning, we've identified several short-term goals and long-term goals. The short-term amendments are coming forward. They're working themselves to the Planning Commission and the typical protocols for that, and so those should be coming to you very shortly. And so we have 5 or 6 of those that will be coming forward, but also we have some long-term, more of a comprehensive nature that we're looking at. So just want to make you aware of that. Thank you.
That it?
Yes, sir.
All right, you're going to have a busy night, though. And we will talk about those during the regular council meeting. Chief Pettis?
Good afternoon. Next weekend, November the 3rd, will be First Friday. We also have a football game, and Brian Stevenson, author of Just Mercy, will be at the Methodist Church Christian Life Center. And it's going to be quite a few people in town. Just wanted to let y'all know. We got 3 big events going to be going on next weekend. And also on the 4th, that Saturday, we'll have our Veterans Day Parade. And so if you don't have anything to do, you can come out and join us at one of these events. We appreciate it.
And if you have something today, make the Veterans Day Parade a priority. How about that? All right, Robert.
You gonna be there? I don't know if I can walk that far.
Council, speaking of events, the chief kind of jogged my memory. I have asked Paige to allow me to attend the Downtown Merchants meeting on Wednesday the 1st, November 1st, because within the next 2 months, we're going to end up with 9 active construction projects downtown, with some others to start after the first of the year. So we're working on putting together a handout showing rules and regulations for delivery times and where you can park and things like that, because we're about to get real busy downtown all the way through Mardi Gras, and we want to make sure that these construction sites are secure, and they know what's going on as far as we don't want to see steel delivered at 11 o'clock on Fairhope or on Section Street during lunchtime. So we're going to be working on that. Construction-wise, it's extremely busy on the residential end. The commercial has really ramped up in the last 3 weeks. We have got a tremendous amount of commercial work going on, both in the county and in the city. And it stands to reason the commercial is going to follow the residential growth. But I know we've got, I think, approximately 5 new restaurants coming to the downtown area, actually 4 or 5. So just blowing and going as we have been. So just like everybody else.
Thank you, Eric. Anybody have any questions for Eric? Okay.
I understand last council meeting, there was a question referencing the Gayfer and Valana traffic lights. The manufacturer of that equipment has submitted all their information to the state to get on the state bids list for us to purchase that equipment without going through a formal bid. Every time we communicate to them, they tell us that in the next, short while we should know something soon, so we're working on it.
That's for some type of magnetic sensor
Pods.
or a weight.
Correct.
How about can we not just add 15 seconds to add 15 to the crossing streets and reduce the wait 15 seconds on the main drag?
We
I mean,
could.
15 seconds would be, I've been saying this for years, would be tremendous difference on
Sure.
getting the flow of traffic through town.
Sure.
Can we try it?
Sure.
I mean, do we have to pass a resolution? I've been asking. I mean, we can't order you to. I can't order you to, but I can get the council to nod and say that we'll pass a resolution if we need to. Can we try it, though? I think
Sure.
I think it'd help. I drive that a
Yeah,
lot.
once the pods come in, they're basically a wireless device versus the old school technology of a twisted pair cut-in loop. This is a
Right.
wireless device that in the event they come back and remill the surface, we can, core cut out and pull the pods out and let them do what they're going to do and core cut and reinstall.
Is that
So-
off to the side?
No, they're in the travel lanes. It's
Oh,
just
they are?
the old traditional loop installation is a shallow, saw cut, and you
wire.
put twisted pair in there, and every time they mill the surface, it damages it. And so this is a newer technology that's.
I would just beg you to add 15 seconds wait to those crossing streets and yet reduce the 15 seconds for the Section Street traffic. The only people it affects is somebody's if they're going left. And that's, very, very seldom that occurs.
Do it every morning, so just wait to do it till after I go to work.
Oh, so we have a
Where do you
conflicting.
go?
We have a conflicting.
You're not making any turns on that street.
You're gonna have to arm wrestle.
No, he's going straight on Section Street. Don't let him fool you. I don't even know if he knows how to get down that street or not.
I don't turn left.
Yeah, you don't even go left down there. All right, who's next? Who do we leave out? Chief Ellis, you got anything?
No, sir. Good night.
Mr. McCrory?
No, sir.
What? Mr. Peterson?
I got a couple of things. One thing I'm trying to introduce as part of the whole moratorium concept is to put in new standards for design, and in particular sewer. And one thing I'm wanting to try to encourage is to provide storage, maybe 2-hour peak flow storage in wet wells of lift stations. And that can be calculated with storage of manholes and the gravity system going upstream. Although there's some places in town that the grade is pretty significant, so there may be some valves required to accomplish that, so you can trap water above the low spot of the wet well. And I'm trying to look at different air relief valves and pump station equipment, and in trying to assess the standards that we subscribe to and compare some of the newer technology, whether it be electrical or whether it be mechanical. It's difficult sometimes to compare that. So, and I've talked with Kevin a little bit about it and sent him a draft of what would be Appendix A, the acceptable sanitary sewer. Dan and I have kind of gone through this, and what we'd like to propose in the short term is to allow standards that aren't exactly what we allow today to be used as a trial basis, and let that trial basis run through the warranty period of this equipment. One in particular right now is the lift station at the apartment complex on South Section. I think it's the best way to integrate different types of equipment, allow there to be some competition among the suppliers. You know, and if you had different manufacturers' reps for the same equipment that we wanted, there would be competition among those reps to provide a good deal, like going to any Ford dealer and getting the Ford, but you get prices from all of them. In this case, we don't have that, and it just seems like it would work better for everybody if there was some competition in some of that equipment. So I've just provide y'all with, and the and it's very short, and it's just an option to do that as an interim measure until we're able to put these standards together and be more comparative than what we will allow. And in case of these trial runs, we won't approve any other similar equipment until it's gone through the warranty phase. So we're pretty confident in what we're getting if we're going to continue to get those. So I don't know where the approval process is in this. I don't know if it's a council approval or if it's a planning commission approval. I think they adopt our regulations. I don't know if they approve them. So, you know, I'm asking for guidance as much as anything too in that regard.
Okay.
But anyway, and I don't know where to take it except to let you be aware that that's kind of what we're looking to try to accomplish.
I've not done that before.
And then that would be the good news in terms of the good news, bad news in this report. We did receive bids on the tank, painting the tank, and the bids were competitive. There was one objection to one of the bids that we received that was predicated on the attendance of the mandatory pre-bid meeting that we had. And of course, part of the reason we wanted to have a mandatory pre-bid meeting was so everybody would be able to say they saw the site. And on the site, there's underground utilities serving some of the infrastructure for the cellular companies. There's some concrete foundation for some of the cellular equipment, and there's some generators out there, and there's some equipment that will remain active during the course of this job. So we just want to make sure everybody understood that. The proximity of the substation was important to us. We wanted to let them know where the fence was going to be relocated. And a couple of days after the pre-bid meeting, I got a call from Tank Pro, and they were asking for the summary of those minutes of the meeting that we had, and I told them then that I didn't see their name on the roster that we had everybody sign up for, but they insisted that they had representation there. So I sent them the information on the pre-bid meeting, and I don't know if it was Hurricane Nate or if it was the marina, or there was all sorts of issues going on at the time. I probably should have gone ahead and looked at ways to resolve that early. But we did receive bids, and we did open their bid, and they became the low bidder in the course of receiving the bids. And so after that, there was an objection because their name wasn't on the pre-bid list. So I called the president of the company and told him that I couldn't accept his bid, that they weren't signed up on the pre-bid meeting roster. And he swore up and down that they had representation there and he could prove it. And I said, well, you're going to have to prove it. And at that time, I kind of gave a summary of those events, and I asked Tut to be aware of it and to get guidance from the legal perspective of, you know, what is considered an informality versus what would be considered something that would be non-responsive. And so we went through, and Tut was helpful in identifying that through the Attorney General's office. Tank Pro has submitted a 50-page sum report that shows correspondence that they contacted an agency to represent them And that agency had another representative represent another tank painting company as well. But the representative that they had scheduled to represent Tank Pro, for whatever reason, didn't make the meeting. And there was correspondence that suggested he was on his way to pick up the paperwork the day before. And there was correspondence that would lead you to believe that Tank Pro did everything they should have done in order to be qualified in terms of being responsive to that particular part of the bid. And so now the recommendation comes to where, what do we do about it? And after reviewing all the documents and talking back and forth with them a couple of times about proving some of these documentation issues that came in the process of this discovery, it seems to me like they had every intention of meeting every requirement, and that I would consider the fact that the person that was going to represent them and didn't, but the person that was representing the other tank company and provided all that information to Tank Pro, pictures and site diagrams that they had, that it would be an informality for them not physically being there and signing up the sheet. And I would recommend that we would award Tank Pro the contract. But now that doesn't mean that's what we have to do. There's still an issue as to whether or not that constitutes a true informality, and I understand that. In that case, we would want to reject that bid, and we would want to award it to the second lowest bidder. In doing that, I feel like, we're kind of playing games with the intent of the competitive bid law. I think everybody, all the bidders, had every opportunity to give us the very best price they could do. And I think when we received that, I think they all had all the same information. I don't think there was anything that was beneficial to Tank Pro for being there or not being there based on the information I got. And I think it's more important to follow the intent of the competitive bid law in this case and waive the informality of not being there and signed up on the attendance roster. But we can reject that on those other grounds, and that could be an issue between Tank Pro and Express, which is the service that they hired to represent them. And I mean, I think that's valid too. What I wouldn't want to do, though, is reject all the bids and allow all the contractors who participated to have everybody else's bid available to them and rebid it, with all that knowledge available to everybody. So, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, I would like for Tut to explain what he's gained in terms of information from the Attorney General. And I think there's an attorney here representing Tank Pro that's going to want to speak to it too.
Richard, I appreciate all this time, but I think that we should hold this debate off until the regular meeting, because this is going to have to be discussed in the meeting, because it's an item that we're voting on tonight. If it was something that we were going to vote on next week and we want to get all the facts, we could, but I want to allow the attorney for Tank Pro or whomever it is they're representing tonight to speak during that portion of the meeting. Tut, if you want to say a few words now, because you are attorney, I do think that it's best, because I have read overall 50-something pages of that, and I copied many pages of excerpts to bring in here to kind of go through that timeline, and I don't think there's an argument to be made about Tank Pro's intent, but there are a couple of holes in the story, I think you would admit. And so, but we need to discuss that in a debate in the regular meeting, I think.
I think Richard has fairly stated the situation. In our bid specs, there is a provision that this is a mandatory pre-bid meeting, and so bidders who want to participate, it is mandatory that they attend this pre-bid meeting. The issue in this case is there was a man there who was an agent for another company and signed in for the other company, and I think the Tank Pro's position is that they were there, that man was also there for Tank Pro, but he forgot to sign in for Tank Pro. So I think from the Attorney General's standpoint, we have, but this sign-in sheet, everybody who comes is supposed to sign in, and what happens is, normally this problem would not arise, but for the man who was there for two companies, but he only signed in for one company. At least that's his position. Now, I talked to the Attorney General's office about this, and basically they say, of course, a responsive bidder is one who submits the bid that complies with all the terms and conditions of the invitation to bid, but it also states that minor irregularities can be waived. And so it comes down to this: the council has the authority and the discretion to determine, was this the failure to sign in for Tank Pro on the sign-in sheet, and therefore not clearly evidence attendance at the meeting for Tank Pro, is that a minor irregularity? And if the council decides it is a minor irregularity, the council can waive that and accept the bid for Tank Pro. The council also has the ability to determine that the irregularity is not a, quote, minor irregularity, but it does affect the definition of Tank Pro as a responsive bidder. By failing to meet this element of the mandatory attendance and sign-in, it doesn't say you have to sign in mandatory, and I think Mr. Alvis, able attorney here for Tank Pro, has pointed that out. In other words, Mr. Alvis points out that the bid package says you must attend the meeting, you must have an agent or employee at the meeting. It doesn't say you must sign the sign-in sheet. So, but anyway, it comes down to, does the council determine this is a minor irregularity and therefore Tank Pro is a responsive bidder? Or does the council determine that this irregularity of failing to sign in for Tank Pro is not just a minor irregularity, but it affects the term of being a responsive bidder? And again, the law says, I'll give you some comfort in that, it says that the council should have the discretion to determine who is the lowest responsible bidder, and that discretion should not be interfered with by the courts unless the council acts arbitrarily or capriciously or had a misconception of the facts. So basically, the courts are saying that they give deference and defer to the council for this decision, except in the extreme circumstance.
Council, I have some comments that I'm going to withhold on this until such time as that item comes up, because I believe it should be discussed in the regular meeting rather than debated in here. But I appreciate all that knowledge, and Richard, I appreciate that. I think Richard accurately portrayed the
Well, I
event.
apologize for the issue, but I did want to end on a positive note. The fuel tanks and the fuel dispensers at the marina are gone. The dispensers aren't gone. They're held back until we can put, hopefully, some temporary tanks there and get it back. And the contractor's working on the bulkhead and the replacement of the dock in front of the fuel dock. So we may have a place to set those up.
Did you look into the trucks, Richard? Because I had talked to, well, I didn't talk to them, but I know that the two leaseholders of the hangars, private hangars at the airport, had trucks. I called Vince Booth as well, and he gave me the name of someone. I never spoke to them, but he knew of someone that can supply.
We have two
these
contacts from Joe,
Okay.
and we're going to follow up on those too. When we met earlier before the issue became, what McKinney was telling us and what our fuel jobber Davidson Oil told us was that you have to have agricultural commissioner stamps on the dispensers to sell gasoline legal at a retail basis. And so that's why we held the dispensers back, even though they may not be the credit card swipe what we might want down the road. But and then there are some technical issues with where you can actually put those tanks. So having portable tanks, temporary basis, may be a better way to do that, but we're going to make the contacts and we're going to see. I do know there are 2 tanks that are used and we can lease, and I've tried to get some monthly and annual lease terms to find out what that value is, and we'll do the same with these portable people. But we're trying to get it done as quick as we can, and hopefully by the time the dock gets redone, we'll have room to work and pour the slab we need to pour to fit all that stuff on it new.
Are we going to make the Looper season?
Now, Lynn, you've been the positive person in all this. We're working hard on it. We're
It's not a
working
good
very
sign if
hard
Lynn
on
ain't
it.
positive about it. Tell you that.
Maybe on their way back.
There is
Both go the same way.
There is
It's
what
a
the-
one-way street.
That's what the loop is.
They don't go upriver, they come downriver.
We're going to
That's all I had. If y'all have any questions.
Any questions for Richard?
I do, Rich. I got
Yes.
an email today asking about power to the light poles at the tennis courts.
Mid-November.
Okay. Whoever sent that
Will you
email, did you
respond
get
to
that?
lady? Eleanor?
No, I didn't respond to her. I
Will-
just-
will-
Yeah, I will.
Okay.
Mid-November.
All right, thank you.
They thanked us for the lights, now they just need some juice. All right, who else? Michael? Anything from the Treasury Department?
Well, since I haven't done this before, let me just make a brief statement, just so you know that I can actually talk.
Oh, we know you can talk.
Yeah, I know. The position that I'm in is I'm facing a very steep learning curve. Y'all know the situation. One of the things I've been able to accomplish that I think is probably the most critical is that I've been able to spend time talking to a lot of different people, getting to know different department heads, finding out what their concerns are, establishing the relationships that I really need in order to really do my job, with the different departments. And so asking a lot of questions. And, that's how you learn about things, asking questions. So I've gained a lot of information, a lot of things. Like when I talk to people, I say, okay, this is something we need to think about at some point in time. But right now, we're going to take, kind of what we know and stick it in our back pocket. And there'll be a right time to bring this out and say, okay, let's address this now. One of the things I've really tried to do is, first, I have to understand how we are doing things now and why we are doing things now, even if the reason is that's the way we've always done it. So I'm taking the time to make sure I understand how we do things, because it's different every place, and it's different here, just like any other place. And so I want to make sure I understand, the whole process, the whys and all that kind of stuff. And then once I get to that, then I have the ability to say, okay, I understand what we're doing it, I understand why we're doing it. Here is, we can make this change or this shift, and and be able to justify that it's not going to negatively affect the way we're doing it currently. So there's a lot of things like that. So it's a process. So just be patient, and I'm very encouraged by the people that I've talked with. We have some great employees, like all up and down the ones I've talked to. So I'm very encouraged with what I've seen here and what the possibilities are. So,
Any
that
questions
good?
for Michael?
I'll run before.
Appreciate your attendance at the personnel
Thank
board
you.
meeting.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, sir, thank you.
I want to touch on the budget for just a few minutes before we get into the agenda meeting. Robert and I met for about 3 hours last night. We focused mainly on the personnel requests, and I think that we may have some recommendations. We're almost there. we need to talk to Mr. Johnson. We need to talk to you. Chief Pettis, we need to talk with you about some of your personnel requests. And what else can you think of right offhand, Robert? And we should be in touch with you this week on those questions.
That was it.
Is Jill in the meeting today? I don't see Jill. I had a request in, Councilman Brown with her, you may have seen that. Request, council, last year, if you recall, we got a list of all positions and the current rate of pay and proposed rate of pay. It included new vacancies, which is different than vacancies, because new vacancies is basically a new position. And it included new positions, which means it's a new job description that's requested. And I think I said this already, but the filling of the existing vacancies. So I've asked Jill to provide us with all of that so that we can get an overall picture of all that. It's kind of hard to see it when you're only looking at added positions. You know, you have to kind of go back to last year's budget, and I was having a little bit of a difficult time getting everything to add up. But we're getting close. I think Robert and I would probably send you guys some things in a few days. The other thing is that department heads on your budgets that you submitted, I don't know that we can provide every single thing that you ask for in your budget. There's a couple of different ways we can do it. We can talk about each item in the budget, and we can cut items, or we can give you a dollar amount and say, this is your budget. Tell us what your priorities are. So there's two ways to go about that. There's actually a third way to go about that, which some people have suggested, which is to, as we go throughout the year, have you bring your items that you request, your capital needs, come to the council, because we do get a second bite at the apple. It has to come back anyway. That has its pros and cons. One of the cons is that you don't really know what you're going to get throughout the year. Some items are very long lead items as well. You need to know what they are up front. But that's just another way of looking at things. Robert, what am I leaving out?
Really just that personnel, getting that, that's nothing new. We had it last year.
Right.
It doesn't have to be created. It's just got to be filled in.
Right.
And I was going to add, I did have
Sure.
a chance to meet with the mayor and Jill, and I had a lot of questions about personnel. That was the main thing I wanted to discuss with them. Out of that proposal, it's a little bit confusing. I think the dollar amount at the end is correct, but the positions, 16 of the positions that are listed as either new vacancies or completely new positions are actually promotions. So that total number of positions is probably about 16 less than what is totaled up at the bottom there, based on my going line by line and add them up.
Well,
But the dollar amount's the same, so I don't know if it really.
Right. Well, I think if we get them all
Better.
on the same page,
Right.
it'll make that picture a little bit clearer. That we had that exact same question.
And in hindsight, also, part of that conversation was that, the department heads did a great job of coming and sitting down and presenting to us their requested budget. However, without the total picture, we're kind of just nodding and going along, sounds good. Hindsight, we probably should have the budget first and then have the department heads come up and present their
Yeah.
proposals.
Yeah, I hate to say that, department heads, but when you're presenting us, all your needs and all your wishes and all your desires, in the beginning, we don't ask a lot of questions because we don't see the big picture. We have to see the big picture before we can make a determination of what we want to do. And so don't take that necessarily as an agreement with what you've submitted just because we didn't put up resistance to certain items. And I think that you all found that out last year. We did cut and slash here and there. It wasn't too bad, but I think we came up with a pretty good budget. Any other comments? Councilman Robinson? No. Councilman Boone?
Nope. Still going through it.
Okay. I feel like I'm leaving something out on that budget, but I just covered this. I wanted to make the council aware of, of all the options, and there's just however you want to do it. We can do personnel, community development. I'm going to sit down maybe with Robert also this week and just kind of go through that. That won't take 10 minutes to go through that community development budget and make some recommendations. You remember last year we passed that prior to passage of the complete budget. Okay, with that, I'll close the work session. We'll go into the agenda meeting real quick. We have item 5 will be recognition of the Veteran of the Year. Lynn, if the mayor doesn't make it back, will you recognize, or I can recognize that? I will do that, okay. Wayne, I believe you're up to bat on items 6, 7, and 8.
Yes, sir.
Council, on my book, 6 and 7, the information supporting that was transposed. So you might want to look at your book before you get into the meeting, because if you flip back on 6 and it doesn't add up, it's because it may be item 7 in your book. Just flop them around. And I don't know if it's that way on your laptops. It was that way in my binder. Is it that way in the computer?
Yeah, I don't think they match up with the agenda.
Okay. All right, so make a note of that, if you will. Item 9 is the impact fee. Councilman Brown, you want to talk about that a little bit now? You were the one that asked to table that at the last meeting.
Yeah, I'll talk about it. My biggest reason for tabling that was to find out if the study was necessary. It wasn't, $68,000 is a lot of money, and we were told it was because of liability. I just wanted to find out if there was a liability from not doing the study. And I talked to a fellow with the State Home Builder Association and told him it's been 10 years, and he recommended that the study be done. He said whether there's liability or not is questionable, but it wouldn't be a bad idea. So
You say every 5 years roughly is a good target number?
he didn't say number of years.
Okay.
I talked to some people also that highly recommended us doing that study. I was like with you, I want to get a little more information on it.
I've got information coming right now in the form of Eric Cortines.
That's one of the guys I talked to. Of course, he's a little biased on the opinion, but so I went outside the bounds.
So what are the questions then, and I'll be happy to address
Why
them.
don't you just tell them what you told me?
Okay,
last
sure.
meeting?
The ordinance that we have actually states that it should be reviewed every 3 to 4 years. Part of the reason, and I know you see $68,000 for a study, and it seems like a lot of money. I know when we make decisions that have legal consequences, we tend to go with an attorney and have them, check it and make sure we're making the right decision. It's almost, I would say that you kind of need to look at it in that same light. One of the few things that I'm aware of we haven't been sued over is impact fees, but it's also a very contentious issue with the folks that have to pay large impact fees. The study along what Tischler Bice, I want to make sure I'm pronouncing that correctly, what they also provide is not only demographic information about, what those fees should be. It'll lay out to you what the law says you can spend that money on. There's a lot of things that you may want to spend the money on, but it all depends on what the enabling legislation allows. So this will give you an opportunity to update the report, because like we said before, it's 10 years old. The information's a little outdated. But it'll also specifically lay out what this money can be used for and what it can't be used for. I know stormwater has come up. Typically, impact fees can only be used for new expansion or development. I don't know if that means we can take that money and go back into older parts of town and upgrade stormwater. The study will tell us, and the consultant will tell us whether we can or we can't.
Well, that's where the lawsuits have stemmed from.
That's
is collecting
yes.
that impact money and spending it somewhere else.
That is correct. And there's also, I believe there are time frames with which you have to spend that money within a certain amount of time of having collected it. And, it kind of depends on how you want to do it. I know there have been times when we've been pushing that time frame. because of the four things that the council that adopted the ordinance chose to spend it on. So you need to know what your time frame is, how long you have to spend it, and what you are allowed to spend it on specifically. And the study will help us with that, and there's a lot of legal advice that's going to come along with that from the consultant, because this is all they do.
Yeah, I did have some questions about the legal part of it. We'll talk about it later.
Yes, sir.
It doesn't need to be.
Okay. All right, thank you. Item 10, we discussed already. Item 11, does anybody have any questions about the holidays? I actually, believe it or not, on the holiday, Clerk, what did you find out? You found out that Monday and Tuesday was preferred, the 25th and 26th?
Yes.
I'd asked Clerk to poll the department heads on that. There was a question of whether they wanted a Friday, Monday, or a Monday, Tuesday. And I think you said that a lot of people like to have the day after Christmas off. That's a big deal.
No, I know it is. When I was in the private world, I never worked the day after a holiday, ever.
Did you ever work?
From time to time I would, but never after the day after a holiday. I'd like my crew sober.
You say half day on Christmas Eve. Now, that's 10 and a half days. Is this a half a day more than we had last year?
Yes, it is.
Did you just put that in there on your own?
Yes, I did.
Y'all see, Lisa slipped in a half a day on us, and I'm kind of glad she did. I ought to give Lisa a hand. She tried to slip it in, but we caught it. But, I mean, who's working afternoon on that day anyway, right? I mean, that's National Goof Off Week, so, I mean, let's just face it. Everybody bring a box of candy to Lisa on that day, for that half a day. Tried to give everybody a half a day off after the employee luncheon the other day, but it was like the middle of the week. And anyway, we had some fun with that last year. Okay, item 12. Ms. Mazur, will you talk about that? I think I can speak to it. It's just a survey that's going to be done that needs to be done prior to putting out the bid specs for the boatyard lease. We have to define what land will be included in that. Is that correct?
This one's simple and formal.
What's that?
This one's real simple and straightforward.
It's real
Well,
simple.
actually, it's not going to define, we're going to define the property. It's going to define the actual property we own and give it on a plat basis that you can look at it, which we do not have at the present time, and then decide what we're going to use for what purposes.
We have a survey for the fence. That's the only
Yes,
thing we have.
that's right.
Okay. Well, let's hope that the rest of it's defined by the water's edge, or the center of the channel. Item 13, we talked about earlier. Item 14 is the franchise agreement that we discussed in the last meeting's work session. Lynn presented us the changes to the franchise agreement. Lynn, I'll ask you to be on standby for that. 12 and 14. 15, Sherry Lee has spoken about that, and we'll ask her to be available should she have more questions. 16, we have both Richard and Tut, who's already made a presentation on that, and they'll be on hand to answer questions about that. Also, we'll give Tank Pro an opportunity to speak. 17, Sherry Lee. And number 18, which is going to take about 20 minutes to read. Chief, you going to talk about that? Man, I tell you, I'm wondering about that name, though. Smoke 'em if you got 'em for a barbecue event. That's a little shady right there. Chief, will you be the one to speak to it, or Mr. Hall? Which one of you will talk about it? Okay. And then 19, we're going to add the Fly Creek sampling plan. Tut, where's Tut? Just draft up a quick resolution. I'll hand this to you when we get up there on the dais. And then also something that is omitted, I think you all are all aware, is that we need to have an executive session to discuss some pending litigation and settlement options on some pending litigation. And I think we found out about this maybe Thursday afternoon. It didn't get published, but we will have an executive session. And then we'll do that after public participation. So I'll ask someone to make a motion to amend the agenda to add the Fly Creek sampling plan and an executive session. All right. Anybody got anything else? For the good of the council, we can take about a 15-minute break. Come back here on time, start 6 o'clock sharp. We're adjourned.